Salisbury, the incongruous setting for an ongoing international incident involving military-grade nerve agent and lives hanging in the balance, poisoned by Novichok as per the Skripal's attack. The Home Secretary pulling no punches, punches aimed at Russia.
It is now time that the Russian state comes forward and explains exactly what has gone on. It is completely unacceptable for our people to be either deliberate or accidental targets, or for our streets, our parks, our towns to be dumping grounds for poison.
We spent today talking to the people who were actually with Charlie Rowley and Dawn Sturges last Friday in the park behind me to try to piece together how it could have been that the couple were poisoned by the same nerve agent, Novichok, as was used in the Skripal's attack. The attention today is here on Queen Elizabeth Gardens in the centre of Salisbury, just 5 minutes walk from Zizi's, where traces of the nerve agent used to poison the Skripals were found. The gardens were not one of the decontamination zones in April. But once they got to the park, what happened? It's likely that the Novichok in the Skripals attack was delivered in a vial or syringe. One working theory is that Dawn Sturges found something that day, possibly discarded after the original attack. Later in the day, she handed it to her partner, Charlie. She got infected first because she touched it first. Now, we put that theory to one of the friends that was with Dawn and Charlie in the park on Friday. He says that although the couple had problems with addiction, they were not using syringes on the day. He says it's more likely, in fact, that Dawn picked up something like a cigarette butt, and that's how she became affected. He was also with Charlie the following morning after Dawn had been admitted into hospital, and he says Charlie told him that Charlie had tried to do CPR and mouth to mouth on Dawn when she started to get ill, and that's why Charlie may have become seriously ill, but sometime later. This is, of course, conjecture from people who were there. One of them, who didn't want to go on camera, did want people to know that their addiction is not the focus now.
That's not the real issue. The real issue is that they've been caught up in something simply by being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
After the park, the group went to John Baker House, a homeless shelter where Dawn Sturges was staying. The couple later spent the night at Charlie Rowley's house in Muggleton Road, Amesbury. The following day, they were both admitted to hospital. Today, police reiterated that this is a fast-moving, complex investigation. But, bizarrely, one of the friends who we spoke to, part of the group of 5 in the park that day, has not yet been approached by the police. Has anyone from the police force or the medical profession been in contact with you about getting checked up, or?
No.
And have you thought about going to anyone just to be on the safe side, or?
I haven't, no, to be honest, no.
Salisbury is a town reeling, not once but twice, from what's happened.
Shocked, really shocked, annoyed, frustrated, because Salisbury's being put on the map for a negative rather than all the positive that we've got to offer. It's just really, really frustrating, and whatever's going on, we just want it to end. We want it to stop, get back to some normality.
Now that it's happening again, it kind of makes you question, was the clean-up done properly or whatever?
It all has local, national, transnational ramifications. At its heart, though, a collection of families, including Stephen and Caroline Sturges, Dawn's elderly parents. We spoke to their neighbours today in the village of Durlington. They told us that at 6 o'clock this morning, Stephen and Caroline, along with Dawn's 2 sisters, went off again to the hospital to spend another day by Dawn's bedside.
Porrick O'Brien in Salisbury. Now, in Russia, the fresh accusations surrounding this second case of Novichok poisoning have been met so far with official restraint and dismay. The Kremlin has expressed concern while denying any involvement in the poisonings. But one Russian MP described the case as part of British efforts to tarnish the World Cup in Russia and fuel tensions ahead of the US-Russian summit. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is in Russia. Alex.
Yes, John, we'll come to the politics in a second, but dismay, Russia really reiterating from the Kremlin the two central points, which has always really been the basis of their response to this. Firstly, they say, made repeated attempts to try and help the British authorities investigate. Now, some may greet that with mirth and contempt from a country for which there is evidence that they were behind the Alexander Litvinenko poisoning some years ago. Be that as it may, from the Kremlin's perspective, they say these are genuine entreaties and we've been completely ignored, and there is some dismay about that. More centrally, and here the Russians have the support of other European governments, like the Germans, for example, is the simple fact that the British have never put forward any evidence to connect this Novichok poisoning with the Skripals and possibly with this new couple with the Russian state, indeed with Russia at all. The British have only ever said it's a Novichok agent of a type manufactured by Russia. That language is important. That was really expressed today by the Kremlin's key spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. He was giving one of his radio interviews to various journalists, which he does on a regular basis. Have a listen to what he said.
You also know that the British side did not present any convincing proof for its ungrounded accusations against Russia on its involvement in the case. You know that the Russian side suggested a joint investigation to the British colleagues. This suggestion was left without the answer.
Alex, is it even big news in Russia?
Oh boy, yes, it is, John. Yes, lead item on all the main bulletins. Just random, really. Have a look at these pictures. This is the News 24, Russia 24 channel today, the biggest news channel in the country. Their lead story, they're talking about it. So go all the other main channels in Russia. The coverage very much, I suspect, what you're getting in Britain. The few facts as we know them, who these people were, where the contamination happened and so forth, being put over pretty much in the way that they probably are in the UK, I'm sure. One thing you notice, the televised statements from Scotland Yard carried at great length here and dutifully translated. Then, of course, matters change a little bit, and I suspect they change here in Russia in the same way that they change in the UK. To this regard, this is someone who's been doing the rounds today. This is Igor Morozov, who's a former military intelligence background in the upper house. He says this is all a distraction. They're trying to smear the World Cup here, as other deputies have said. He also says it's all about Theresa May shoring up her own position within her cabinet. She's a weak prime minister. It's all about distraction and so forth. So that's the view. To sum it up, frankly, there are politicians in Russia, there are politicians in the UK, both sets of them, on the basis of almost no hard evidence whatsoever, are making politics out of this and drawing conclusions on the basis of their own politics, not of the facts, because there are very few facts. John.
Alex Thompson in Russia. Now, joining us in the studio is Dr. Sally Leavesley, who is a security specialist. She worked at the Home Office as a scientific advisor on nuclear, chemical and biological threats. And the first question I think people are bound to have is, would it be easy to distinguish the first batch that attacked, that struck the Skripals, if indeed this is the same or indeed a different batch?
Well, interestingly, it may be the same batch but mixed at a different time. So what the scientists will be trying to do will be probably compare some of the material they'll have from the Skripal incident and see how that's aged and whether this matches it in age, because we've got 4 months. And what's a little bit out of sync here is that this seems to have had the same process of effect on these two new and very sadly new victims, but a decayed product may not have operated in that way.
And it should have decayed, you're arguing.
The expectation, if it was very tightly sealed in a syringe or a capsule, maybe, and everyone has to learn because no one has the answers on this new product. It's a case of observations, but the observations would be that it's more likely to be a fresh mix of the same batch rather than necessarily a decayed, disposed of
What do we get
batch.
from the fact that it's in a different part of the city? I mean, I suppose they could have moved it themselves, but I mean, does it indicate that perhaps the clear-up wasn't as complete as it should have been?
I don't think this has got anything to do with decontamination whatsoever. It's more likely that if one of the forensic pathways can certainly be that it's been a hostile nation state, and we know that Britain has made a direct accusation to Russia. And that nation state needs to muddy the waters with lots of stories, lots of different counterpoint views, and to particularly take the international pressure off it for sanctions. If it can raise enough questions in international minds and remove the very tight support that there is for Britain over the Scribbles case.
But that would suggest that scientifically it may be very, very difficult actually ever to conclude anything from this.
No, I think the scientists will be able to conclude because at the molecular level, they'll be able to see the level of decay. But the important thing is, internationally, has another team come in and done this particularly to protect the reputation of an international state? Or has it been a supply chain issue where some medical waste has got into the park and been picked up and reused? We just don't know.
Well, both are pretty explosive questions. So thank you very, very much indeed for coming in, Dr. Sally Leavesley. Thank you.